Malcolm Holloway wiped the sweat from his brow as the wind howled through the gaps in the metal walls of his cabin. Ridgefall Station wasn't a station anymore. It was a crumbling outpost on the edge of the galaxy, abandoned years ago after the core meltdown below. The automated systems hummed quietly, keeping some lights alive, but the colony had long since vanished. Malcolm had chosen this solitude, a place no one else dared to stay. Every day was survival. He checked the solar panels for damage, scavenged energy cells from the lower levels, and cataloged the old machines that still functioned. He repaired broken robots and rerouted power to keep the cabin warm when the cold outside could freeze him in minutes. It was a lonely existence, but Malcolm thrived on it. Loneliness sharpened his mind, danger sharpened his courage. That evening the sky burned crimson. Clouds swirled in twisted shapes, glowing with the dying light of distant stars. Malcolm stepped out onto the balcony to inspect the wind sensors. The gusts tugged at his coat, whipped his hair across his face, but he ignored the chill. He had grown used to the harshness of Ridgefall, but the station was unpredictable. One wrong step could send him plummeting into the abyss below. A faint tapping echoed at the cabin door. Malcolm frowned. The wind could not make a tapping sound. He froze, listening. There it was again, soft, deliberate, like someone knocking. His heart beat faster. He had not seen another living soul for years. Visitors didn't come to Ridgefall. The outpost was supposed to be empty. Cautiously he reached for the door. A small shadow moved at the edge of the light. When he opened it, he nearly stumbled backward. A tiny creature stared at him with eyes like glowing sapphires. Its scales shimmered in the last light of the sun. Wings no larger than a child's arm quivered at its sides. It tilted its head, watching him with a strange intelligence, a curiosity that felt almost human. Malcolm blinked, unsure if he was seeing a hallucination brought on by years of isolation. "What are you?" he whispered. The creature chirped softly, a sound that resonated in his chest, like it was trying to communicate. He crouched, keeping his movements slow and calm. The creature made no move to flee. It had not flown away. It did not hide. Somehow it trusted him. Malcolm felt a strange, tight pull in his chest. A mixture of awe, fear, and something else he could not name. Something familiar. He remembered the old texts he had found in the ruins. Stories of Drakari, alien creatures rumored to bond with humans. They were said to sense courage and morality, choosing only those who had strength and wisdom beyond their years. Could this be one of them? A Drakari hatchling? Impossible. But the way it looked at him, the way it waited, made his pulse quicken. The wind outside picked up, howling like a predator. Clouds churned violently. Ridgefall was dangerous at the best of times, and now it felt alive, watching him. He knew the hatchling would not survive long in these conditions if he did not act. Its tiny body trembled, wings quivering uncontrollably. Malcolm reached into the cabin and grabbed a soft blanket, wrapping the creature gently. It pressed against his chest, trusting him completely. His mind raced. He had tools, scraps of circuits, old drones, anything he could use to protect it. But every plan carried risk. One misstep, one wrong wire, and he could lose it, or worse, the energy surges from the station could fry it. He led the hatchling to the small workbench in the cabin. The creature chirped again, tapping lightly on the metal with its tiny claws. Malcolm examined it closely. Its skin was warm, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. Its eyes followed his every move, calculating, learning. There was a connection forming, a bond that neither time nor distance could explain. He set to work immediately. Using pieces of drone circuitry, he began constructing a small stabilizer to protect the hatchling from the harsh winds and the station's erratic energy fields. Sparks flew and the cabin smelled of burning metal, but Malcolm ignored it. He could feel the creature's tiny trembles through the blanket, and that was enough to push him beyond fatigue. He worked fast, carefully, as if the hatchling's life depended on his hands alone. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The sky darkened, clouds turning black and red as the station groaned in the wind. Malcolm adjusted wires, monitored energy readings, and whispered softly to the creature. "You're going to be okay. I won't let anything happen to you." The hatchling's glowing eyes blinked in response, and for a brief moment, Malcolm allowed himself to hope. Then a sudden crackling from the station's outer systems made him freeze. A burst of energy surged through the cabin, shaking the walls. The stabilizer flickered, and the hatchling squeaked, almost leaping from his hands. Malcolm's heart slammed in his chest. One more burst like this, and all his work would be destroyed and the creature could be lost forever. He clenched his jaw, determined. Ridgefall had tested him before. He had survived storms, energy surges, and the loneliness that would have broken any ordinary human. He could not fail now. The hatchling had chosen him for a reason, he just had to prove he was worthy of that trust. A soft glow emanated from the creature, brighter than before, almost like it was urging him forward. Malcolm's hand tightened on the blanket. He knew this was only the beginning. The station's energy spikes were growing, the winds outside reaching a dangerous pitch, and the hatchling's small body was not built for this. But he would find a way. He always did. And then another tapping came, this time from deeper in the cabin, somewhere no one should be. Malcolm froze. Something else was stirring in Ridgefall. Something that could change everything. Malcolm's hand froze on the doorframe, the hatchling pressed tightly against his chest. The soft tapping from deeper in the cabin continued, slow and deliberate, echoing through the metal walls. Ridgefall was supposed to be empty. Nothing should move but the wind and the hum of old machinery. His pulse raced. Whoever, or whatever, was inside had to be investigated. He carefully set the hatchling on the workbench. Its glowing sapphire eyes blinked up at him, almost as if warning him. Malcolm took a deep breath and grabbed the small plasma torch he kept for repairs. It was crude, but it could serve as a light, and a weapon if needed. Each step into the darkened cabin felt like walking on the edge of a cliff. The wind outside rattled the panels, the station groaned under stress, and Malcolm felt the familiar adrenaline surge. As he advanced, the tapping stopped. Silence filled the cabin, thick and heavy. Malcolm strained his ears. Then, a faint rustle came from the corner where old crates had been stacked. He flicked his torch on, and the beam landed on a pile of torn tarps. A small rodent scuttled away, disappearing into the shadows. Relief washed over him, but it was brief. Ridgefall had taught him never to trust relief for long. The hatchling chirped softly, wings twitching nervously. Malcolm returned to the workbench, checking the stabilizer he had been assembling. The small device was now critical. Outside, the winds had picked up, stronger than anything he had faced before. Energy surges from the abandoned core pulsed unpredictably, and without the stabilizer the hatchling could be blown away, or worse, electrocuted by a stray surge. He worked quickly, hands steady despite the pounding of his heart. Malcolm had always been precise. Years of repairing failing systems in hostile environments had honed his skills. The hatchling watched every movement, almost studying him. He realized then that this wasn't just a creature, it was intelligent, perceptive, and cautious. It trusted him, and that trust demanded action. Almost there, he muttered, attaching the final circuit. Sparks flew, sizzling against the metal table. The hatchling hissed and crouched, wings flaring slightly but did not jump. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He understood the stakes. One wrong connection could fry the stabilizer, or worse, hurt the creature. He adjusted the power flow, rerouted a few nodes, and held his breath as he flipped the switch. The device hummed to life. A soft magnetic field shimmered over the hatchling's body, lifting it slightly from the table. Its wings twitched and a faint glow spread across its scales. Relief surged through Malcolm, but it was cautious. Ridgefall never allowed for comfort. He knew the storms outside were growing, and the station's energy pulses were unpredictable. Every second counted. Then a loud crack echoed through the cabin. One of the support beams above groaned and shifted, threatening to collapse. Malcolm dove forward, shielding the hatchling with his body as debris rained down. Dust filled his lungs and he coughed violently, but he did not let go. The hatchling chirped in alarm, tiny claws clutching his sleeve. His hands shook, but his mind raced faster, calculating every movement. He had survived worse. He would survive this too. Once the immediate danger passed, Malcolm helped the hatchling back onto the workbench. Its glow dimmed slightly, but it pressed against him, a silent affirmation of trust. Malcolm felt a wave of emotion he hadn't felt in years: responsibility, hope, and a fierce determination to protect this fragile life. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin, but inside, the bond between human and creature had grown stronger. Malcolm knew he could not keep the hatchling here indefinitely. Ridgefall was dangerous, and the energy surges were only growing. He needed a plan to move it somewhere safe. But every route outside the cabin was perilous. The cliffs were jagged, the wind unpredictable, and the station below was unstable. One false step and both of them could be lost. He paused and studied the creature. Its tiny wings flared once, then settled. It looked up at him, almost expectant. Malcolm felt a surge of determination. He had faced isolation, storms, and mechanical failures, but this was different. This was life itself, fragile and precious, relying on him completely. "All right," he whispered, voice steady despite the tension. "We'll get through this." He began scavenging old crates for materials to create a portable shield, something that could protect the hatchling during the journey outside. Every second the device wasn't ready was another second of danger. The wind outside rattled the cabin walls, and a sharp gust sent a loose panel spinning across the floor. Malcolm leapt to secure it, never taking his eyes off the hatchling. As he worked, a faint hum began to resonate through the cabin, different from the usual creaks and groans of Ridgefall. It pulsed in rhythm with the hatchling's glow. Malcolm froze. He had not heard anything like this before. The hatchling chirped nervously, wings twitching, eyes narrowing as if it sensed the same thing. Something was coming. Something beyond the wind, beyond the crumbling station. Malcolm's stomach tightened. He had survived Ridgefall alone for years, but this felt different. This wasn't just a storm or a mechanical failure. The hatchling's subtle warning told him this was something he had never faced before, something that could change everything. He gritted his teeth, determination hardening. He would not let the creature, or himself, be caught off guard. He adjusted the stabilizer, checked the circuits again, and whispered, "We face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together." The wind outside roared, louder now, as if responding to his words. And then a bright pulse of energy flashed from the station below, illuminating the cabin for a split second. The hatchling leapt instinctively, wings flaring, and Malcolm realized they were standing on the edge of something far bigger than either of them had imagined. The moment hung in the air, heavy with tension. The station groaned, the wind screamed, and the hatchling looked to Malcolm for guidance. He knew that the next steps would decide not just their survival, but the bond that had already begun to form. And then, from deep within the shadows of the cabin, another sound, soft, deliberate, and unmistakable, echoed. Something moved. Something alive. Something waiting. Malcolm's pulse jumped. The hatchling twitched against him. Ridgefall was about to test him in ways he could not yet imagine. Malcolm held his breath as the movement in the cabin grew louder. Shadows shifted along the walls, cast by the flickering lights of his unstable systems. The hatchling pressed against his chest, wings fluttering with nervous energy. Its glowing eyes locked onto the darkness as if it could see something Malcolm could not. Slowly, Malcolm stepped toward the source, every muscle tensed. His plasma torch hummed in his hand, casting a narrow beam across the floor. Dust particles danced in the light, and the groan of the station made him flinch. Then he saw it, a small figure scuttling between crates. Another rodent, he thought, relief washing through him. But the sound grew heavier, deeper, unnatural. His gut tightened. This was no ordinary creature. The hatchling's glow pulsed faster, wings flaring, sending a warm shimmer across Malcolm's arms. He realized in that moment that it wasn't only responding to the darkness, it was sensing danger. He had read about alien instincts, about how some species could anticipate threats. Perhaps this hatchling could. Perhaps it had chosen him not just for companionship, but because it saw something in him worth protecting. Malcolm crouched, keeping the hatchling close. His mind raced. Ridgefall Station had failed once. The core meltdown had killed hundreds and forced evacuation. If the hatchling had survived until now, then the dangers weren't just external, they were internal, unpredictable. Energy spikes from the failing systems could kill them both. And now, there was something else in the cabin with them, something alive. A sudden metallic screech made him leap back. A fallen support beam had shifted, scraping against the wall, sending sparks scattering. The hatchling hissed, pressing closer. Malcolm's pulse raced. He needed to stabilize the cabin to protect the creature, but he could feel the urgency building. Every second the hatchling stayed here without full protection, it was at risk. He grabbed wires and panels, rigging them into a crude barrier around the hatchling's perch. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and his hands burned slightly, but he ignored it. Years of survival in Ridgefall had taught him to prioritize life over pain. The hatchling chirped again, wings fluttering faster, almost guiding him. Malcolm realized it was helping him focus, its instincts syncing with his. Then another sound, a low rumble from below. The station shuddered. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling. Malcolm's heart hammered. The energy core was acting up. The stabilizer could only do so much. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before the station's failing systems would become lethal. He crouched beside the hatchling, speaking softly. "We need to move. Now." His mind calculated. The balcony outside was dangerous, cliffs dropping into nothingness. Any slip and they'd both die. But staying here was worse. Ridgefall was no longer a home, it was a trap. The hatchling chirped again, a sharp sound, wings flaring. Malcolm understood, it was offering a choice. It trusted him to decide, to act. That trust ignited something in him. He wasn't just a survivor. He was responsible. For this life. For his own. Courage was no longer theoretical. It was immediate. He picked up the hatchling gently, wrapping it in the blanket. Sparks from the stabilizer flickered, and the glow of its scales reflected in his eyes. The winds outside had grown stronger, whipping against the metal walls. One wrong step and the cliff would swallow them. Malcolm's mind raced. He had to balance speed with caution, intelligence with instinct. He moved to the balcony. The hatchling shifted, wings fluttering instinctively. Malcolm took a deep breath and stepped out into the night. The wind slammed into him, nearly knocking him off balance. The hatchling chirped, almost frightened, but he held it tight. Ridgefall was testing him, testing his resolve, his skill, his courage. The cliff edge was treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out from the darkness, hidden in swirling clouds. Malcolm's boots slipped once, sand and gravel skittering underfoot. He froze, heart racing, and the hatchling's glow pulsed brighter. Its energy, its presence, anchored him. He adjusted his stance, slow and deliberate, moving with care. Ridgefall could kill him if he hurried. But he could not hesitate. Hesitation meant death for both of them. Halfway along the narrow ledge, a surge of light exploded from the station below. The ground shook violently. Malcolm grabbed the hatchling tighter, instincts kicking in. Debris flew past them and the wind clawed at his coat. He had to make a decision: turn back into the cabin and risk collapse, or press forward toward the relative safety of a lower plateau. He pressed forward. Each step was calculated, deliberate, precise. The hatchling chirped once, softly, and Malcolm felt it guiding him, sensing danger he could not yet see. He reached the edge of the plateau. Below, the station groaned, metal twisting and snapping. Sparks shot into the sky, illuminating the swirling clouds in an eerie crimson light. Malcolm's chest heaved. He was exhausted, soaked in sweat and dust, but he had made it this far. The hatchling's small body glowed in response to the energy surges around them, a beacon in the dark. Malcolm realized then, Ridgefall had been testing not just his courage but his mind, his ingenuity, and his ability to protect something weaker than himself. A sudden screech echoed from the station, louder, closer. The energy core had shifted again, and the stabilizer's hum faltered. Malcolm froze, heart pounding. The hatchling chirped frantically, wings flaring. The cliff below was not the only danger. Ridgefall itself, the collapsing station, the energy surges, the treacherous winds, was alive, waiting for a mistake. Malcolm swallowed hard, determination settling in his chest like steel. He had survived years of isolation, storms, and mechanical failures. He had repaired machines others deemed impossible. But now this wasn't just about survival. It was about courage, about protecting life against odds no human should face. He whispered to the hatchling, "Hold on. We'll get through this. Together." Its glow brightened, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The wind screamed around them, the station below groaned, and in that moment, Malcolm understood that Ridgefall was not just a place, it was a test. And whatever came next he would face it. Not just for himself, but for the small creature that had chosen him long before this night. From the shadows of the plateau, a faint glimmer of movement stirred. Malcolm's pulse quickened. Something, or someone, was coming. Something that could change everything. Malcolm crouched on the plateau, the hatchling trembling against his chest. The wind screamed, tearing at his coat, threatening to hurl both of them into the abyss. Below, Ridgefall Station shuddered violently. Sparks rained from the failing energy core, illuminating the jagged cliffs in strobing flashes of red and white. Every instinct in his body screamed to move, but one misstep could be fatal. He scanned the terrain. The plateau was narrow, the cliff dropping sharply into black nothingness. Ahead, a narrow ledge twisted toward a cluster of old supply sheds that might provide temporary shelter. Malcolm's mind raced. He had seconds to act. The stabilizer had held the hatchling safe so far, but it was straining, flickering with each pulse of energy from the station. One more surge and the creature could be fried. He took a deep breath, forcing himself calm. Panic would get them both killed. Ridgefall had tested him for years, and he had survived every hazard because he kept his mind sharp. This was no different. He carefully adjusted the blanket around the hatchling, ensuring the stabilizer maintained contact with its small body. Its sapphire eyes glowed brighter, wings twitching instinctively. It seemed to sense his thoughts. They were in this together. Malcolm moved forward, step by step, using his hands to steady himself against the jagged rock. The hatchling chirped softly, almost in encouragement. A sudden gust nearly tore him off balance. He dropped to his knees, holding the hatchling close, listening to the pulse of its energy. The stabilizer hummed, but the readings were erratic. He realized the device could only handle short bursts of the station's surges. The only solution was to amplify its output, but doing so risked a total overload. He had to reroute the stabilizer's energy through his own body as a conductor. If he miscalculated, he could be electrocuted. Sweat poured down his face as he mentally traced circuits and power flows. Every wire, every connection had to be precise. One mistake and they would both die. He pressed the hatchling closer, whispering, "I need you to trust me. You've chosen me, now I choose you." Its wings twitched, a faint pulse running through its body. Malcolm felt a bond stronger than fear. The hatchling's instincts were extraordinary, but it could not act alone. He had to combine its abilities with his intelligence and courage. He stripped some wiring from his toolkit, linking the stabilizer directly to a nearby energy conduit. Sparks flew, the device whined under the strain, but the magnetic field around the hatchling strengthened. Its glow intensified, radiating warmth that contrasted with the icy wind. The hatchling chirped louder, wings flaring, and Malcolm realized it was reacting to the amplified energy, synchronizing with him. Suddenly, a crack echoed from below. A support beam in the station's core had collapsed, sending a pulse of energy rippling across the plateau. Malcolm staggered, almost losing his footing. The hatchling squeaked in alarm. He steadied himself, gritting his teeth. Ridgefall wasn't done testing them. It was alive and it wanted them to fail. He focused. The only way forward was to use the hatchling's instincts as a guide. Its wings pulsed, sensing safer routes across the treacherous plateau. Malcolm adjusted his path, following its subtle signals. Rocks shifted underfoot, energy pulses jolted the ground, and the wind clawed at him relentlessly. But step by step he advanced, using both brain and instinct, relying on courage as much as skill. A sudden surge from the station caused the stabilizer to spark violently. Malcolm grabbed a metal pipe from the ledge and held it against the device, grounding the excess energy through the rocky plateau. Pain shot through his arm, but he did not cry out. The hatchling shivered, but the device stabilized. He had taken a risk, risking himself to protect another life, and it had worked. The plateau narrowed again, leading to the supply sheds. Malcolm crawled forward, using the rocks to shield the hatchling from wind gusts. Its glow brightened in response, and he realized that the creature was adapting to his presence, feeding off his determination. Together they were stronger than the hazards around them. Then a louder rumble shook the ground. Debris tumbled from the cliffs, and the station's core emitted a bright, violent pulse. Malcolm's eyes widened. The ledge ahead was about to collapse. They had only seconds. He grabbed the hatchling firmly, scanning for the nearest safe point. A small outcrop jutted from the rocks, just wide enough for them to land safely. He took a deep breath and ran. Every step was calculated, precise as the wind tried to throw him off. Rocks crumbled underfoot. The stabilizer hummed frantically, the hatchling glowing brighter than ever. Malcolm leapt, landing hard on the outcrop. The hatchling pressed against him. A massive portion of the plateau collapsed behind them, falling into the abyss with a deafening roar. Malcolm gasped for air, clutching the hatchling close. Its wings fluttered softly, a calming pulse running through his arms. They were alive. The danger had not passed entirely. The station still rumbled, the wind still screamed, but for the first time in hours they had won a moment of safety. He looked down at the hatchling. Its glowing eyes met his, intelligent and aware, as if it understood everything he had done. The bond between them had solidified, not just survival but respect, trust, and shared courage. Ridgefall had tested him to the limits of human endurance, but he had risen to the challenge. Malcolm realized something profound. The hatchling had chosen him, yes, but in that choice, it had given him purpose, something beyond survival. It had reminded him of what humans were capable of: courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to act for others in the face of impossible odds. He whispered to it, voice steady despite the storm, "We're not done yet. There's more ahead, but together we'll face it." Its wings twitched, and the soft pulse of its glow seemed to echo his heartbeat. And then a low rumble from the station grew louder, more violent. The energy core was reaching a critical threshold. Sparks leapt into the sky, and the wind howled like a living predator. Malcolm's chest tightened. They had survived the immediate danger, but Ridgefall had one final test waiting, and this one would demand everything he had: skill, courage, and the bond he had just forged with the hatchling. Malcolm's knees trembled as he crouched on the outcrop, the hatchling glowing faintly against his chest. The wind screamed around them, carrying the roar of Ridgefall Station as its energy core spiraled toward catastrophe. Sparks shot into the night sky, illuminating jagged cliffs and swirling clouds. He had never felt so small, so fragile. And yet, he knew he was capable of more than any storm or machine could throw at him. He scanned the collapsing plateau. The stabilizer had kept the hatchling safe so far, but its circuits were overloaded, glowing red-hot. One more surge from the core and it would fail. The hatchling's wings twitched violently. Malcolm felt its fear, its instinctive awareness that time was slipping away. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had survived storms, isolation, and Ridgefall's merciless terrain, but this was different. This was survival against a force bigger than himself, and he could not afford to fail. A sharp pulse of energy erupted from the station. Sparks flew, shaking the ground beneath him. Malcolm grabbed the hatchling firmly and adjusted the stabilizer, rerouting excess energy through a metallic conduit anchored to the rock. Pain shot up his arms, but he ignored it. The hatchling chirped, wings flaring in response to the surge, and for a brief moment, their pulses seemed to sync, creature and human united in purpose. Malcolm's mind worked faster than his fear. The only way to save the hatchling, and himself, was to use Ridgefall's energy against the problem rather than fight it. He scanned the plateau and saw an old drone charging station nearby, its energy cells still intact. If he could redirect the energy pulses from the failing core into a controlled channel, he could amplify the stabilizer without frying it. But it meant bridging an exposed circuit himself. One misstep and he would be electrocuted instantly. He took a deep breath, gritting his teeth. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. "Hold on," he whispered to the hatchling, feeling its tiny heartbeat against his chest. He reached the drone station, carefully removing the energy cells and linking them to the stabilizer. Sparks flew and the magnetic field around the hatchling flared like a miniature storm. The creature chirped in alarm, wings flapping uncontrollably, but it didn't break away. It trusted him. Another surge erupted from the station, stronger than before. The ground shook, dust and rocks tumbling from the cliffs. Malcolm's hands burned as he maintained the connection, sweat blinding him, but he refused to let go. The hatchling's glow intensified, feeding off the controlled energy. Malcolm realized they were working together, its instincts, his calculations, their bond creating a feedback loop strong enough to stabilize the creature. Then a deafening crack split the night. A massive section of Ridgefall Station collapsed, sending a shockwave through the plateau. Malcolm's boots slipped on loose rock and he almost lost his balance. The hatchling chirped desperately, wings flaring as if urging him to move faster. Malcolm gritted his teeth and lunged toward a narrow ledge, sliding the hatchling ahead of him. They landed with a jolt, hearts racing, dust and sparks filling the air. The energy pulses continued, but Malcolm had done it. The stabilizer held. The hatchling's small body shimmered with a steady glow, no longer flickering. Malcolm collapsed against the rock, arms aching, sweat and blood mixing on his hands. He looked down at the hatchling. Its glowing eyes met his, intelligent, aware, almost proud. In that instant, Malcolm understood something profound. He had survived not just because of skill or luck, but because he had chosen to act selflessly. He had placed another life above his own, and that courage had allowed him to overcome the impossible. A soft, melodic chirp escaped the hatchling. Its body began to change, shimmering and expanding, scales stretching as it transformed. Malcolm's eyes widened. The hatchling was growing rapidly, evolving in response to the energy in their bond. Its wings stretched wide, strong enough to carry it into the sky. For a moment, Malcolm feared it would outgrow his control, but the creature pressed its forehead against his palm, a gesture of trust and recognition. He felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, relief, awe, pride and joy. Against impossible odds he had protected this creature. Against the wrath of Ridgefall and the station's collapsing systems, he had survived. Humanity had triumphed not through weapons or brute force, but through courage, ingenuity and compassion. The hatchling chirped again, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the cliffs. It lifted off his chest and hovered, wings beating powerfully against the wind. Malcolm watched, heart pounding, as the creature circled him once, twice, then turned toward the horizon. It was free, but it had chosen him. That choice wasn't a fleeting moment, it was a bond that would last beyond time, beyond Ridgefall, beyond anything Malcolm had imagined. He stepped back from the cliff edge, watching as the hatchling ascended into the night sky, its glowing sapphire eyes fixed on him. The station below continued to crumble, but Malcolm felt no fear. He had faced Ridgefall at its worst and emerged victorious. The hatchling had tested him, the winds had tested him, the collapsing station had tested him, and he had met each challenge with human ingenuity, determination, and courage. As the wind calmed and the dust settled, Malcolm sank to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. He touched the stabilizer, now quiet and steady, and whispered, "We did it. We survived." The hatchling chirped softly from above, a melodic, reassuring sound. It had acknowledged him not just as a protector, but as a partner, as a human worthy of its trust. Malcolm smiled, realizing the enormity of what had happened. Humanity, even alone on the edge of the galaxy, had the power to survive the impossible. Ridgefall Station might crumble, storms might rage, but the courage of one human, combined with intelligence, determination, and morality, could bend the universe's odds. He looked up at the stars, chest still heaving, and knew that this night would stay with him forever. A tiny life had chosen him. He had risen to the challenge. And in doing so, he had proven that humans could shine, even in the darkest corners of the cosmos. The hatchling let out one final melodic chirp, a sound that resonated with the cliffs and the stars beyond. Malcolm waved, heart full. Together they had survived Ridgefall. Together they had defied the impossible. And together, they had begun a bond that would last far longer than any station, any storm, or any fear could ever destroy.